for coming. Thank you for
Thank
traveling.
you for inviting me, man.
And you're essentially, we are on our second or third year of this podcast. You are our first like official. I'm calling you our first official guest. Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Listen, Los doesn't count just because
Okay.
we're friends.
Yeah, I got you.
You'll roll through at any time. My boy Jeff, he's been around and in my circle forever now, so I don't really count him. And my friends have obviously been on it. And the reason my friends are on is just because they're my friends.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't even know how to pronounce your last name.
Arroyo.
So, Arroyo.
Okay,
So Felix Arroyo. So, man, so let's just go back and let's bring me up to speed, quote unquote, tell me about your journey. Let's talk about your journey, man, because growing up, what was growing up like, just give me a little bit of background.
Well, it pretty much stems off of the realm that we're in here with the podcasting world is pretty much how we kind of got linked up. So the podcasting, and that started for me a few years back in 21. I was working a dead-end job, in my opinion, working FedEx Freight. I was a dock worker sitting on a tow motor for 8-10 hours a day. And so it got to the point in my life where I was always like looking for there's something I need to do.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I want to have, peace of mind, but like quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, there needs to be something that I can put myself into that gives me, my time back, because a job like that, they call overtime last minute. You got to stay. I'm already driving. And I drove on the way here. I drove past it, and I was like, man, I haven't driven this road in like an hour. Like a year or two. Right. So, long story short, I needed something that would give me my time back, and trying different things. Podcasting was always in the back of my mind. I never really pursued it. And then I listened to a lot of them.
Uh-huh.
And it was always like, I can do that.
Yep.
I can do it.
Yep.
And then one day it was just literally just like, the hell with it.
Uh-huh.
And growing up, I've always been intrigued by storytelling. I've always loved it. I couldn't explain it. I would write plays. I would write plays that were already out. Like I wrote The Christmas Carol. I wrote that on a typewriter that my mom had. The Wizard of Oz, the same thing, and my family would act it out.
So you would just rewrite.
Yeah, I would rewrite it.
Sure.
But I was so
change details.
Right, I was so inspired from what I saw.
Well, that's exactly what this is. I mean, every podcaster we see is we're just taking what they're doing. Yeah, of course.
And the funny thing, I was talking to my wife and my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. I for whatever reason, I love black and white movies, and so the TV classic channel, every now and then I'll come across something, and my little girls are sitting with me. They don't know what they're watching, and neither do I really. I just love it. I told my wife a story. I said, when I was a kid, I would go help my uncle cut grass in Delaware. For like 3 summers in a row, I stayed with him, my mom and my sisters and I. And he had his own business, but on his side hustle, he would clean out trailers, like abandoned trailers, and he would bring back junk. But things that he thought were cool, VHS tapes, vinyl records, whatever. And there was a VHS. It was the 1939 Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney. It was a silent movie, black and white. It's the classic where he reveals himself. And I remember watching that as a kid, just intrigued. Couldn't hear it, just read, and just paid attention to the acting and the storytelling. And I was enthralled. And Phantom of the Opera is like one of my favorite stories of all time. So I tie that in to like what I'm doing now with the podcast. And if anybody's been watching, I had to really scale back on my editing because I just don't have the time anymore. But I really want to like push like the Radio Lab type of like when you're listening to a story, there's the sound effects, there's the music being played. And I really try to incorporating that into these journeys. But it's just a lot, because I work a full-time job and I have a family, and you know what it's like. So
well, and I mean that's where I'm at too. I mean, this is now like the 5th iteration of the studio, as I've mentioned, but it's now to the point where you're right. Even this is overkill, and I'll be editing this episode, being like, oh my god, okay, we need the split screen, we need the single, and it's just And I started with these microphones because I said, if you're going to have a podcast, you have to do it like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
You have to have the SM7Bs and the high definition cameras and whatever. And so and I know that that's just me. And that, you know, I do everything to the max, and it's always overkill, and it's always, you know, but when it comes to realizing that there's something more out there, right? Your dead end job, or like even just, let alone just FedEx, like, holy shit, I can't imagine. Yeah. Like, you know, make your career at FedEx. Jesus. But I mean, good for you for recognizing that, because I feel like that's still something a lot of people struggle with.
Oh no,
right?
1000%.
Right. Just having those ideas and even because I'm surrounded by a lot of people, by them seeing me do this, they're like, oh, I want to do that, or I want to do this, or I want to do this. But to them, those ideas just stay ideas.